Good afternoon, dear friends in Christ. I feel privileged to be invited to share with you today on this occasion when you celebrate your day with Mary. And I want to talk about predisposing ourselves to the devotion to Mary as a whole. The day with Mary, which we celebrate on the first Saturday of the month, is one of the many expressions of our devotion to Our Lady. But I often ask myself, how disposed are we? How much preparation do we do before undertaking or before coming forward to meet Our Lady? How much preparation do we do before we recite the Hail Mary? The light is not giving me enough, it's not allowing me to see my script. I don't know how to manage that. But I'll try to put these in the light of the Fatima message. And I see the glorious lady and the glorious crown. We often forget that crown is a mark of the appreciation of the great things she did for the women of Portugal. Back to our topic. How can we dispose ourselves? And the predisposition is that before the words, before we carry the bead, our whole life is that devotion to Mary. And I want to try in these few minutes to see how much I can highlight about that devotion so that when we say the words, we are actually crowning that devotion like the women of Portugal crowned the glorious lady after the experience of the war. What do I mean by predisposition? We know the Fatima message. Pray, do penance. But I wonder how often we remember that doing penance, I think somebody catches it very well, that doing penance is not about sleeping on thorns, rigorous fasting that impairs your health, but a submission, a recognition of the state that God has called you to, and a total acceptance of that state. A recognition of your state of life, and a total acceptance. And sometimes these can be very difficult. I'll give you one or two illustrations. One is that you marry a man you love so much, or you marry a woman you love so much. You thought you knew so well. And a few years, few weeks after, he is a different person. Or you suddenly discover things about your partner you never knew were there. How do you take it? How would God want you to take it? We live in a society that is always crying justice, justice. Sometimes I say to them, this justice is not about God's justice, it's about vengeance. Devotion to Mary. The first thing she said, because in the scripture you find that so much is packed into so little. So much is packed into so little. Follow Mary back again to that Annunciation message. And she says, let it be done to me as you have willed. As you have spoken, so let it be. She didn't say let it be because she understood Angel Gabriel. She didn't say let it be because she could see how the child she was going to born, his life would unfold. The amount of pain it would bring her. She didn't know nothing about that. She was just sure that God was talking to her. And for her, if God was part of the story, that was sufficient. If she didn't have the strength, God would provide it. And so that predisposition is recognizing that state that you have. and taking all the ugliness, the uncertainties, the things you do not know. There is one part of Our Lady that we often don't like to highlight. She pondered those things in her heart. And too often I say the heart of the lady must have been like the bottom of the ocean, having so much. And when she cries to God, who is the only one that can understand what is in her heart. That is one of those things required for the predisposition. That you reconcile yourself with your situation in life. We are in a world that is ruled by capitalism, ruled by all kinds of politics. People are always struggling for power. Sometimes the preachers don't even help us. They give you the impression that for you to be of significance, you must have so much power. And so all of us are crazily looking for power, even though we don't know what we are going to do with the power. We are looking for fame. Again, back to the predisposition. The silence of Mary. When I talk to people about devotion to Mary, I often say, imagine that you are the mother of God. Just imagine. Okay, imagine that you are the mother of Theresa May. Just imagine that you are the mother of somebody of what? How will you feel? You want the whole world. Your shoulders go, add centimeters above your height. You want to throw your weight around. She lived in that silence, the same silence in which she lived. Only she could feel the weight of the work that God had put upon her. She wasn't like you and I. Because of her purity, she could see. She could feel. So imagine that weight. For those of you who go on pilgrimages, you will see when you get to Nazareth, there is this well that has now gone down there. And they call it the Wail of Mary. That is where the poor woman, like any other woman, went for water. It wasn't called the Wail of Mary in her time. It was the village well. Again, the predisposition is this silence in which we must live, not struggling for recognition. There is something that is amiss in our time, that we think that the more famous you are, the better it is for you. We forget that fame is distraction. The more people know you, the less you are home to yourself. All day you are struggling to respond to people. And many of us have reached that stage. Go look at the so-called social media. They are on all of them. Apart from servicing millions of relationships that have no direct consequence on your life, you are perpetually living in the public space, not having time for yourself. Now, if you can't be home to yourself, when do you pray? When do you meditate? When do you give strength to the Hail Marys you say? It is not sufficient. It is not sufficient that we meet her on the day with Mary alone. The day with Mary is when we come to share in that crown. And a little bit of the crown. I think I keep making reference to the crown. The original apparition had no crown. I hope you remember. She didn't appear with a crown. The Portuguese, one sister there told us, I was studying in Portugal, I am still doing that. That the lady said to the Portuguese, if you don't go to war, nobody will fight against you. And so Portugal avoided the last World War. And true to her prophecy, nobody struck them. And when the war was over, the women gathered their gold, all the things they had, built that crown, and put on the head of that lady that saved their land. And that's why you see her. If you go, the original statue now, the one in Fatima, carries the crown. But the crown, she didn't appear with a crown. She appeared without one. The crown is a mark of gratitude. When we predispose ourselves, when we meet Mary, we meet her to put our own share of precious metal on that crown that she wears. You can't put your own share there and not have a share. Go back to the 3 children, again in Fatima. And she tells them, 2 died early. Jacinta says to Lucia, who was to live long, tell them, I am going to heaven soon. You have to stay here to spread the message about the devotion. Between Jacinta and Lucia, who would you say suffered more? Little Jacinta died of illness. Lucia was to carry the burden of talking about that lady for decades. Again, talking about the distractions we have in life and the things that don't allow us to pray well. And I'll mention a few. The length of our lives. I want to live long. I often tell people that you can't catch me praying for long life. When I pray to God, I say, if you want me to live long, that's your own side. It is not lack of gratitude. The thing is that you are here for 80, 100, 120 years. Do you know how long eternity is? How much do we invest in eternity in comparison to how much we invest here? A lot of people are our enemies because we think they want to kill us. We think they are against us. We forget that the person who kills you actually does you a favor, actually. I'm sorry that I'm sounding like that, but it's my conviction. The scripture does not say people shouldn't kill you. It says you shouldn't kill yourself or kill somebody. So the person who kills you hasn't done you a disfavor. Your life will end ultimately. That is predisposition, that you live without fear. That you live without fear. It doesn't matter. Well, I often say we worry about staying alive. Did you ever worry about coming to this side of the world? This side of God's creation? Why do you suddenly get so disturbed about the length of your life? Why don't you make the moment that God has given you a quality moment? And then, leave the rest. As a priest, some of my hardest moments have been when I go to attend to very old people. Sometimes when you deal with them, you go away thinking, if this is old age, definitely I don't want it. So it's not even a wonderful blessing that God gives you all the years, except you are a holy person. Then every day you live becomes a special blessing. But how many of us have that consciousness? We think living long is about seeing our grandchildren and seeing all the other people. I am talking about predisposition, and the absence of fear in your life is part of that predisposition. That absence of fear is manifested in your attachment to the truth. And there's something about truth. You don't rehearse it. You don't look at the face, your audience face, when you are speaking. Because if they want to kill you, you should be too glad that you are killed after telling the truth. It doesn't matter who does it. Now, when you live that way, you can begin to feel, when you call on Mary, you can feel her. That was how the poor woman lived. Living in the presence of God, completely separated from everything around her. Devotion to Mary is a crown, and I keep repeating that thing. You are a privileged people. We live in a world that has become so secularized. And sometimes you talk to people, they want to give you the impression that there's nothing beyond this point. There is. If you can't feel it, it is because you are holding too much to the things around you. If you let go, you will see. And you don't need anything. God is not in Fatima. God is not in Jerusalem. God is in you. Is in you. So if you do not allow him to manifest in your person, you can travel around all the sites and you may not get the experience. And so I want to say, we are privileged to call on Mary. An extraordinary privilege. Sometimes you meet people who become so apologetic. We have to pray to her. We're just praying to her. We're just asking her intercession. She is not a goddess. My friend, go and check all the apparitions of the lady. When she comes, the people she's appearing to, they just go down on their knees without, it's a spontaneous action. You can't see her majesty and not fall down. She won't even allow you to worship her anyway. She won't even allow you to worship her. It is you will be the one rolling on the ground if that is the only way you can show your appreciation for seeing her majesty. I want to say that as you come for the day with Mary, go back again. Look at where you belong. Look at the context that God has inserted you. Look at the people around you. Look at all the difficulties. Sometimes it is illness. Sometimes it's the presence of a stubborn person in the family. God does not sleep. One of my old parish priests used to say that God is a ball, an eye that has no eyelids. That is, he's perpetually awake. There is nothing happening in your life that he does not know or see. You do not need to introduce yourself to God. He doesn't require your introduction. You don't need to inform him. They are after me. They want to kill me. He doesn't require all those. God does not sleep. And so when you pray like that, you are wasting your time. And do you notice that the holy men and holy women of God, when they go to pray, they do not talk. It's people like you and I, too distracted by the world. We think that God is as distracted as we are distracted. So when you meet him, you want to explain to him, I did this, then you did. I didn't do nothing. There's nothing you need to tell God. He knows. And so the best prayer you can always say is just reach the Blessed Sacrament and sit down. If you don't know what to say, tell him, I have just come to see you. I have come to see you. That is enough. Because he is with you in those journeys that you make. That consciousness is a predisposition. It's only like that you can carry your life. Your whole life becomes a reparation. Remember the Fatima message. And so that is what we are required to do as people who celebrate the majesty of Mary. I think it's Alphonsus Leguri who says, true devotion to Mary demands discipleship. Your life may look difficult. It may look like you don't have everything. But if you realize that this body you are struggling with is just food. In fact, if you are not privileged, I don't know how many of us will enjoy the privilege of incorruptibility. That which will live in you is that spark of God, the breath of God. It is not that skin you are struggling so much to keep aglow. If God wishes to keep it alive, he will keep it. It doesn't need a cream. Doesn't need perfume. It doesn't need perfumes. At least in our own time, you have the example of Padre Pio. All kinds of fun, all kinds of torture came to the man. I am not sure that poor Pio ever imagined in his life that his body would be incorruptible. Because he lived every day in pain. If you have read his story, he told Jesus, don't expose me to the world. I can bear the pain. That is, don't let the wounds appear. He always had that pain. He prayed, don't let it manifest. I'll take the pain, no problem. But God does his things his own way. And so after 50 years, I say, I'm sure Pio, when he looks up now, he'll be smiling at his body. Are you still there? Predisposition, our predisposition as a requirement for devotion to Mary. It is not just the recitation of the beads. It's not just the wearing of the scapular. It's a whole way of life. And it is in that life that the message, the prayer she asks of the children, the reparation, save the world. Do not be worried about your salvation. You will be saved. Don't worry about that. It's increasingly becoming the least of my worry. On my way here, I said to God, you know I will go to heaven. I don't have any problem why I will not go to heaven. Because I have a resolution that every time I find a correction, I will struggle to make it. And God does not expect anything more than that. If you know you should say sorry, say sorry. If you have a little bit, share the thing. If you don't have, don't worry. Life can't be simpler than that, can it? God does not expect you to add another tower to the Westminster Cathedral. No. He just wants you in that your small space to create a small room for Mary. So from your way of life, when you say Hail Mary, you are really hailing. We say Hail Mary, not because she wanted to be hailed, but God made her a hailable entity. And as you call the name, the blessings that pour through her pours because God has made her the channel. A day with Mary, a day to remember, a day to look forward to. We can pray that as children of Mary, men and women who call upon her name, we will, in our own little way, maintain the silence that will help us to pray. Accept our difficulties, seeming difficulties, sometimes really hard, as our own contribution, as that reparation. Try to behave well, even when people don't. I want to believe that none of you, as people who are devoted to Mary, who have heard the Fatima message, go to communion stretching your hand. The angel taught the children to kneel and to receive the communion on their tongue. Even as a priest, if I am not the celebrant, I wouldn't want to put my hand. I wouldn't want to put my hand, especially when I am not vested. Little things you do, she sees them, she will bless you. These are predispositions before you begin the recitation, before you tell people about Mary. Your life must be a life of reparation, a life lived in silence, a life lived in solitude, a life lived in total submission to God. May the Lady of Fatima, she who appeared to those children with no knowledge of anything and has made Fatima what it is, make our lives a message to the world.